How do you compete with empires when you have nothing? The year was 1550. The world belonged to empires. Spain had gold from the Americas. Portugal controlled the spice routes. England was building its navy, and France had armies that could march across Europe. And then there was the Netherlands. No gold, no empire, no mountains, no natural resources. Just swamps, wind, and a problem. The answer came from a poor farmer in 1594. Hey, hoi, welcome to the Dutch door. Kom maar in. Ga je mee? For centuries, Europe had been building cathedrals, castles, ships, siege engines. Everything required timber, and timber required sawing by hand. Two men with a whipsaw, a long blade with handles on both ends. One man stood in the pit below the log. One man stood on top. They pulled the saw back and forth, up and down, hour after hour, day after day. To saw 60 logs, 120 days of backbreaking labor. This was the bottleneck. You couldn't build faster than you could saw. Didn't matter how skilled your shipwrights were. Didn't matter how good your designs were. If you couldn't produce timber at scale, you couldn't build at scale. Then came Cornelis Corneliszoon from Uitgeest, born in 1550, a miller from a small town north of Amsterdam. Not a nobleman, not a scholar, a poor farmer with a wife and children. But he understood something no one else had figured out. Netherlands' greatest resource wasn't underground, it was overhead. The wind. The Dutch had been using windmills for centuries, grinding grain, pumping water out of polders, the reclaimed land below sea level. The entire Dutch landscape was shaped by windmills. They were everywhere. Cornelis looked at a windmill, then he looked at a whipsaw, and he asked a question no one had asked before. What if wind could saw wood? The problem, though, was mechanical. A windmill rotates. A saw goes up and down. How do you convert circular motion into linear motion? 1594, Cornelis figured it out. So how did it actually work? Picture a traditional whipsaw. It's basically a long blade that cuts when you pull it down through the wood. Normally, you'd need two people pulling and pushing for hours. Corneliszoon's genius was connecting the saw to the windmill's rotating shaft. As the windmill spins, it turns a crankshaft, kind of like the pedals on a bicycle going round and round. The circular motion gets converted into an up and down motion that pulls the saw blade down, then lifts it back up, over and over again. The wind is doing all the muscle work now. But there is a second problem. You also need to move the log forward into the blade. Otherwise, the saw just cuts the same spot repeatedly. That's where the rack and pinion comes in. Think of it like a gear rolling along a toothed track. As the windmill turns, another set of gears slowly pushes the log carriage forward, feeding fresh wood into the saw blade at just the right speed. So you've got two mechanical systems working together, one moving the saw up and down to cut, another pushing the log forward to keep it cutting. Both powered by the same wind, turning the same windmill shaft, just cleverly directed through different gears. Set it up right, walk away, and the wind does everything. The log gets cut into perfect boards, while the miller just maintains the machine and loads the next log. And the numbers were staggering. Before Cornelis, remember, 120 days to saw 60 logs by hand. After Cornelis, 4 to 5 days with wind power, 30 times faster. Wood production exploded. By 1600, there were sawmills all along the Seine River. It became the timber capital of Europe. They imported raw logs from the Baltic, from Norway, Sweden, and Poland. Logs that would take months to process by hand. Dutch sawmills could turn them into planks in days. By 1650, the Netherlands had 16,000 merchant ships sailing the world, more than the rest of Europe combined. The English shipbuilding industry didn't adopt windmill technology until much later. By the time they caught up, the Dutch had already conquered the seas. The windmill wasn't just a tool, it was a competitive advantage. It was the factory, the assembly line, the Industrial Revolution before the Industrial Revolution. The windmill wasn't the end of the story either, it was just the beginning. Cornelis Corneliszoon's invention in 1594 solved the production problem. The Netherlands could now produce timber faster and cheaper than anyone on earth. But timber is just material. You still need a design, a purpose. And 1 year later, in 1595, in a shipyard in Hoorn, Dutch craftsmen built something that would change everything. A new kind of ship. Not a warship, not a galley, not a carack. Something the world had never seen. A ship designed not for battle, but for profit. Not for kings, but for merchants. Not for conquest, but for trade. The windmill gave them the means. This ship gave them the method. And together, they built an empire. Today, most old Dutch windmills are more museum than machine. Restored, turning slowly for tourists or for small artisan work like grinding flour or pressing oil. But the way they work hasn't really changed. Wind hits the sails, turns the shaft, gears convert that motion into power, whether for sawing, grinding, or pumping. What's changed is the scale. Now it's not wooden gears, it's magnets and generators. The same wind that once powered sawmills now powers cities. The design has evolved from paltrock to turbine. The Dutch didn't invent the wind turbine, but they built the foundation for it. Their mills proved that wind could be tamed, directed, and turned into power long before electricity existed. Today, off the Dutch coast, massive white turbines rise where old paltrocks once stood. Same wind, same principle, just a new kind of blade. From sawing wood to powering grids, the Dutch story of wind isn't over. It's only changed shape. Because in the end, the story of the windmill didn't stop with wood. It became the story of energy itself, and that's where we're headed next. Next time, 1595, the Fluit, the ship that conquered the world.